Hi, welcome to Matt's Garage. Many of you know I'm restoring a 1972 Scout 2, but this video applies to many people who want to upgrade their brake system. So I have a list of things I want to do, and one of them is brakes, HB. HB stands for HydroBoost. There's a lot of talk about HydroBoost. It's a factory system that was used on many GM vehicles and Dodge, I believe. And I want to show, and maybe even Ford, I don't know, but I'm going to show you how they work and take you through piecing a system together. Now, if after this you're like, I'm not going to go through that trouble, you can always call a vendor for whatever project you're working on. Tom's has a kit, I believe. I know IH Parts America for Scouts has a complete kit that you just buy the entire HydroBoost system. But I went to a junkyard and picked up some parts. I'm not going to use some of them, but I'm going to talk you through the thinking and tell you what my plans are. This is the HydroBoost system as it's laid out on your vehicle, okay? Now, in a normal non-HydroBoost system, you've got a power steering pump and there's a pressure port on the back that will have a line going to the pressure port on your steering box and then a return line from your steering box back to the pump. And that is the whole cycle, okay? Pressurized fluid goes through the screws in here, and as you turn your steering wheel, the hydraulically supported power steering pump turns the pitman arm, and that turns your vehicle's wheels. With the HydroBoost system, there's a step added, and basically a pressure line goes from your steering pump, and generally it's an upgraded steering pump that's capable of slightly higher PSI ratings. Stock pumps are in the 1,000 range. A HydroBoost pump will be higher, usually in the 1,400 to 1,500 range. And so that powered hydraulic fluid comes through a hydraulic line, a pressurized hydraulic line, into this HydroBoost unit, and then pressurized fluid continues through this line back to your power steering pump. What's unique about reservoirs for HydroBoost lines is they need to be dual return. So you have the return from your power steering gear box back to the reservoir, but you also have a return here from your HydroBoost back to your reservoir. Return lines are just a function of all hydraulic systems, basically. What happens when you have a HydroBoost? Well, you got a gas charged cylinder here and some sort of similar vane system or geared system where when hydraulic fluid comes in, it adds pressure to the lever when you press the brake pedal. Okay, and this is connected. And this will be connected to your master cylinder just like your normal vehicle. Great. What does it do? It increases your braking power tremendously. Let me take you to a vacuum booster and explain those to you. Now this is your sort of typical vacuum booster for a GM vehicle. This happens to be a Scout, but they're all essentially the same. This is a double diaphragm. You can tell by the depth. The single diaphragm will be more of a pancake style. I believe this is a 9-inch. So you're boosting your power brake boosting effectiveness is solely determined basically by the diameter you can fit of diaphragm under your vehicle. They're all essentially the same. It's a big diaphragm inside. Here's the vacuum line that comes off your engine, and there's suction, right? So when you push on your brake pedal, that pushes in there, and the suction from your engine helps push this bar forward into your brake master cylinder. Okay, so A, it depends on vacuum. B, it's not a there's not a very good pedal feel. You guys know, like when your engine stalls, you don't have a very good pedal to stop your vehicle when you don't have any vacuum. And also, obviously, if you've got a lumpy cam or some low vacuum application, boosted application, you're not going to get good performance out of your brake booster. Now, a lot of guys run them. They work great. They've been working great for many years, but they just don't give you that extra oomph that a HydroBoost does. Now, pay attention to this distance here. I'm going to talk about this in a second. Now, a HydroBoost system is a little different in that there really is a direct connection between, sorry for loud noises, there's a direct connection between the brake pedal and this. When you push, it comes right out, and it's actually a much better feel when the power's off to the vehicle than a typical vacuum boosted application. So what I've learned from researching these brake systems is that really they're all the same. In other words, this GM Power HydroBoost unit is essentially the same you'd get on an Astrovan, which is what this came out of, or a diesel 1500 from the 90s, or anything else. The only differences, the only practical differences, okay, are the orientation of the mounting plate. You can see here this one has sort of a bump out and angles back because the Astrovan has limited space, so this actually angles down, which is why this master cylinder has this goofy angle to it, right? So that this is straight when the whole body's angled down. If you go to get a 90s diesel K1500 power brake booster, this would be a flat mount because it mounts straight to the firewall, and the associated master cylinder would not have this angle. It would be straight like a normal master cylinder. So the only difference again is the mounting location and the arm length. Okay, if you notice, if you go to the vendors for Scouts, for example, they'll sell you a mounting plate that you basically take this nut, take the snap ring off, you break this nut loose, take this mounting plate off, put the new mounting plate on, put the nut back on. What that does is give you the appropriate distance so your pedal mount will lock onto this appropriately. You don't technically have to do that, and that actually adds about 1.5 inches of protrusion into your engine bay. My plan is to actually do a flat plate and just cut and re-weld this to the appropriate Scout distance off the brake pedal. And I've already checked, and this hole appears to fit onto the key, the nub on the Scout brake pedal perfectly. That's obviously something you want to get right, and then you put like a washer and a cotter pin in there for safety. I mentioned the stick out on the vacuum assisted one. You see here it's very different. This one sits back, and if you compare the master cylinder that came with it to a stock master cylinder on a Scout, you can see here some slight differences. This one, even though the engagement flange that goes into this bore is the same, there's a deep hole before the pin actually engages the master cylinder, whereas here it's very shallow, which makes sense because this is more shallow. So that's something you have to pay attention to. You can't just get a brake master cylinder off of an Astro and throw it onto a Scout, a HydroBoost off of an Astro and throw it onto a Scout master cylinder. They got to be matched, or you have to put in like a spacer pin to match up to that Scout master cylinder. Now, I don't like Scout master cylinders. Why? Because they're cast iron, and there's really, like, technology's moved on. So my plan is to actually use this. So I paid $50 for this at a pick-apart, and the core charge for a remanufactured GM booster is around $50. So I'm going to pick up a new one. I think they're $350 at O'Reilly's, or a remanufactured one, from a 90s K1500 diesel pickup with a flat plate. And then I'm going to cut the arm to and weld it to match the Scout. So it's I'm also going to get a power steering pump off the same type of pickup because I have a Chevy engine. This should mount right up to my Chevy mounting locations, and then the line from here to there will be a stock line. From the power steering pump to the HydroBoost will be a stock line because the locations are about the same, and the line from the HydroBoost to the steering gear should be about the same. The only difference is these use sort of metric O-ring fittings, these use old style flare fittings. So I just need to get an adapter for that, okay? And the the stock power steering pump off a HydroBoosted vehicle, GM vehicle, will have dual return ports. So I can just run a normal return off of there and a hose from there. Those aren't pressurized. So that should be a piece of cake. And then I'll just get the GM master cylinder for that same vehicle application, because that had front disc and rear drum. That really, there's only two factors in a master cylinder. One is the bore size, and two is what type of system do you have. There's drum, disc up front, drum in the back, or four-wheel disc. And then it goes to a proportioning valve. So really, it doesn't, as long as it's a disc drum in the vehicle and you're replacing with a disc drum master cylinder and the associated proportioning valve, I think it's not going to be an issue. So that'll be nice. These weigh nothing. It's an aluminum body with a plastic reservoir. These weigh a ton, so that takes a lot of pressure off of your firewall. This is heavier though, so it might even out, but this is also closer to the firewall, so leverage is less. Oh, and the other thing you need to consider is because your pump is now doing the work on two devices, it's always a good idea to throw on a cooler onto your system. It expands your fluid capacity, so there's more fluid doing less work, and B, it cools your fluid dramatically. I'm actually thinking about also buying a 12-volt little fan to bolt onto that, because when it's hottest is when you're off-roading, right? And then you have no airflow. So I might just get a 12-volt fan that kicks on and off with the electric fan for the Scout. One thing to note is if you go with the Astro system, this isn't what the power steering pump looks like, because they don't have room for a pump like that. The Astro pump is mounted way low at the bottom of the engine, and then there's the reservoir is remote mounted on the firewall. Okay, and for that one you could, I guess, make this a dual return canister. The other option is you use a T, so your returns T together and go into the pump. Now, there's some fluid dynamics involved there. If you get a T, you got to make sure it's oriented right. I understand the shark bite T's have a little more of an inner diameter, so these are the PEX T's for residential applications. But just keep that in mind if you're putting a system together. Or if you don't want to bother, just go with a vendor. They'll buy the whole system. They won't buy the whole system. You'll buy the whole system from the vendor. So that's HydroBoost explained. You know, a lot of guys, they say, why bother? It's too complicated. I actually don't think it's that complicated a system. I actually think it's quite simple and elegant, especially considering the power add. I've yet to read somebody not liking a HydroBoost system once they put it in. So I will report back once I have this up and running, but I have a feeling it's going to be awesome. I do need to rebuild my steering box because the seals are leaking, but that's it's been like 20 years since I had a rebuild last, so it's about time. Anyway, that's it for Matt's Garage. Thanks for watching.